Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we're going to be discussing Doug Wilson and his latest counter signal against those who are more based than him. Specifically, we're going to be diving into a recent interview that Doug Wilson gave on the Room for Nuance podcast with Sean DeMars, who I think is an industry plant because this guy has a lot of money invested in his, podcast, but a comparably small audience, but he has landed some pretty high profile guests, the latest of which of note is Doug Wilson, and we're going to be discussing that interview in this video. And Doug Wilson has a habit of counter signaling those who are more based than he is, and that has not changed in this video. But the reason why I want to talk about this is because Doug Wilson and his comments are pretty relevant to an ongoing discussion about whether the woke right exists or not. And I'm going to, basically tell you in this video why the woke right isn't a real thing, or at least it's not a real thing in the way that it is commonly used. So there are some woke people on the right, but it's not who Doug Wilson and Sean DeMars are talking about. So also, Doug Wilson gets Big Eva wrong, and I find that kind of disturbing, to be honest, that he doesn't fundamentally get Big Eva. So, despite the fact that he is Big Eva. So, with that said, we're going to get to that, but first, I want to let you know Evangelical Dark Web is a Christian news gathering and commentary ministry. You can support our work over at our Patreon-like system at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. There's more access to more articles, some hot takes that are a little too hot, some behind-the-scenes stuff, and you get to guide the research direction of Evangelical Dark Web as a reward, an extra bonus for supporting us. The least you can do, however, is like this video, subscribe to the channel, to the podcast if you are new. New subscriptions are the best thing you can do with those magical YouTube algorithms. So, here is the interview on the Moscow mood at Room for Nuance. And again, I think the guy is an industry plant, but Doug Wilson and Joe Rigney are tag teaming this one. I find this one interesting because Joe Rigney came from Bethlehem, Minnesota, and went to Moscow, Idaho. So it's kind of an interesting, he changed to being Presbyterian and embraced Christian nationalism, which made him at odds with John Piper, who, I think you guys know how I feel about John Piper and his overratedness. So here's the first part about the woke right.
Left, but the dissident right guys.
Yeah, yeah. Think about G.K. Beale, sort of, you become what you behold. You spend so much time interacting with the woke that you begin to mimic their tactics.
Well, I would say I wouldn't say mimicking their tactics, although there is some of that.
Yeah.
I would say that, and this is something I'm actually quite concerned about on the right, is identity politics.
Yes.
Is very much a danger on the right.
Yes.
Okay.
We don't want to just do it better than them.
Right. Well,
which is what a lot of people on the right are doing.
These are people who have been taunted their entire adult lives for being white.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And finally they say, okay, I can't do anything about it. I might as well be proud of it. So I might as well embrace it, and I'll take a page from your book, and there is
not your book.
A page from the woke left.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I'll take a page from Saul Alinsky. I'll take a page from those guys. And I'm going to be white and proud. I'm going to start hating Jews. I'm going to start, I'm going to start doing the thing. And that is a big concern of mine. And I regard it as almost entirely the creation of the left.
Oh. So I want to stop right there because this is something that Doug Wilson fundamentally gets wrong about what politics is. Certainly in a republic, all politics is basically identity politics. And that is something that we have to deprogram, this indoctrination of, politics is just about ideas, because at the end of the day, it really isn't. It's far more about identity and, group behavior, especially, and the type of government that we have. The Democrat Party mastered this by, building a coalition of, minorities and white people who hate white people. That is the Democrat Party. And, they got some funding from, a certain group of people that wear certain hats. So that's the Democrat Party. The Republican Party has kind of been everyone else. Obviously, it is more of an issues-based party. But if the Republicans can wake up white people, it could be game over for the Democrats. So there is an advantage to identity politics when the left wants to throw down with identity politics and, white people are still the majority. I think it's time to say, white people need to wake up that, the country kind of hates them right now. And that is a good message. That is good political messaging. We shouldn't run to that. We should actually embrace it. In the same way, Christians, evangelicals, we are a influential voting bloc, and we need to embrace that. We need to, recognize that and, kind of be responsible about that. It is identity politics at the end of the day. These are issues that appeal to white evangelicals, and that is what the Republican Party should be catering to. Obviously, we've had some issues with that recently, but all politics is basically identity politics. It's just a matter of what group is being served by what policy. So there's a sense that, the liberals, they understand one thing that, the so-called classical liberals do not, and that is you can legislate morality. There's an entire generation, probably at least 2 or 3 generations have been indoctrinated with the idea, and Doug Wilson's generation was probably included in that you cannot legislate morality, but that the result of this indoctrination has been unilateral disarmament, that you can't engage in identity politics, that you can't legislate morality. In reality, all politics is identity politics to some degree. That goes back to ancient Rome, where you got the Caesarians and the Pompeian factions. This goes back to ancient Rome with identity politics. It's just a reality on the ground. It cannot be ignored. And to ignore it, to pretend like it doesn't exist, to try to be above it in a pompous and pious way, is simply unilateral disarmament. Same with the idea that we cannot legislate morality and that institutions can, in fact, be neutral. This is all unilateral disarmament thinking, and that is kind of what Doug Wilson is engaging, or not kind of, that is definitely what Doug Wilson is engaging in here, and that's why the so-called woke right doesn't exist. Where the woke right does exist are people who did not go woke for black people, but will go woke for Jews.
Oh, yeah.
Right. They invented it.
But can you fill out the almost?
Almost entirely?
Yeah.
Oh, I think a bunch of it comes from Adam.
Okay, all right.
In other words, everybody's a sinner. And so basically, vain philosophies oftentimes grease the skids.
Yeah.
But we don't really need help coming up with sin. A lot of the agitation on the right is envy-driven. And envy is something we get from Adam.
Right.
The material and the lies and the stories that are told, we can get from the propagandist.
Yeah. 2 more factors that
What if it's not envy? In reality, it's not really envy. It's the fact that there's a gun pointed to our heads, which is what they're going to be talking about in a second. I mean that metaphorically, but in some cases it has been literal with the usage of lawfare, the FBI, and other institutions.
I might add to that, although, good base level foundational sin stuff there, we'll keep that. I think whenever you spend so much time engaging with people in a particular battle, it's just so easy for the way that they do battle to become the way that you do battle.
Yeah, fight fire with fire.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's right. And Jesus kind of said to do the opposite of that.
There's a guy on the right, Kurt Schlichter, who's got a tagline that he addresses to the liberals. He said, "You're not going to like the new rules. You invented these new rules, and we're coming back at you, and we're going to use your rules to come after you. And you're not going to like the old blues song. It ain't no fun when the rabbit's got the gun."
I got to point out how ironic it is that Kurt Schlichter kind of believes in this, even though he's kind of the guy early on to the idea that, the Constitution's dead. He's kind of been early on to that. But he's also, isn't he the guy that's suing the Blaze on behalf of Sydney Watson in her, feminist lawsuit? Which I've read, by the way. It's a very feminist lawsuit.
That's what we're looking at here, I think.
Many moons ago, Russell Berger and I on Defend and Confirm did a podcast series against critical theory proper and then all the manifestations thereof, queer theory, fat theory, every theory, critical pedagogy. But then our last episode in the series was a word to those with whom we agree. Be careful. Be careful. You can oppose wokeness in a way that is unbecoming of Christ.
Right.
We took a lot of heat for that because they were very happy when we were going, yeah, woke is bad. And woke is bad. And they should be happy when we say that. But when we gave that last little bit of warning, we caught a lot of flack for that.
Yeah.
Have you had any of that in your ministry where you have, not the flack, excuse me, have you done any of that, like, don't fight fire with fire?
Absolutely. Man, I've said over and over to people, don't take the bait, don't take the bait, don't take the bait. On the anti-Semitism, which is starting to manifest itself on the right, I've been fighting that tooth and nail. And a lot of people a lot of people on the right have responded with an okay boomer kind of thing. You're a boomer con, you're a Reaganite, you're that kind of conservative. We are very grateful to you for the decades of service you put in, and we'll take it from here. It's time to take Grandpa's car keys.
William Wolf kind of reminds me of that. And I think he stood up at one of your events and asked you a question. Anyways,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yeah, he was at one of the events,
DC,
but he's real warm.
Yeah, no,
Has he been warned? Okay.
and he wouldn't.
And William's a personal friend of mine. I'm not trying to talk bad about him, but he basically, you said, hey, the ship's going down. And he was like, that's defeatist, right? I mean, anyways.
Yeah. So
But yeah,
basically,
we've issued the warnings, and while recognizing the different threat levels posed by these, which is the no enemies to the right discussion of, we're not going to reactively cancel people to the right just because the left starts calling names. We know how that works. So some of back to the question of death by 1,000 cuts, at some point people have to realize if you get used to putting daylight between you and another Christian over lies, it'll just get used on you. You're incentivizing the thing. And there's a real need for, if it's not true, that's when you want to put your arm around and this is a Christian, this is a brother, and not put the distance because you're trying to save your credibility with people who are willing to lie about everybody.
and who are never going to give you that credibility anyway.
Right. Yeah. Chase that as long as you want.
So let's pause right there because that's the end of this section. And Doug Wilson, he has done some good work in the past, but, it's just true that, he is still a boomer, and that generation's the most indoctrinated generation in the history of mankind because they grew up with 4 channels. So it's just clear that, there's a lot of programming that goes in, and their political operating system just is not up, in general, I'm generalizing, is not up to the snuff. Now, however, there are some pretty good activists in the boomer generation that we don't really have in the millennial zoomer generations. We just don't have that, and we need that. And I'd encourage that, by the way. But Doug Wilson, and one of the things that, people want to take the car keys from him, so to speak, using their language, is the fact that, he wants to berate Christians on being envious of Jews, and that's frankly not reality. The reality is that Christians are starting to recognize that Jews and Muslims should be, treated the same in terms of, these are both religions that are not Christianity. And what does the Bible say about that? The problem is that so many Christians have been indoctrinated into believing that, Jews are different from all the other false religions out there. Judaism, Talmudic Judaism, actually, they don't even recognize that it's Talmudic Judaism. They think that Old Testament Judaism is continuation in the new, covenant era, and that this is a different category compared to all the other pagan religions out there. And the reality is that's a lie. The reality is that those people need Jesus, and they really need Jesus. And no amount of pretending that there's, a guaranteed, escape hatch for them that, that's not going to happen, maybe not in this lifetime, but it's going to happen maybe in the distant future. That has not been a very effective evangelism strategy. Sucking up to them has not been a very effective evangelism strategy. And that is what evangelicals have been inundated with, to our own detriment, to the detriment of our nation. America, we have a, parasitic relationship. We went to war with Iraq to help out this country. So there's a lot of retrospect going on right now about how we should be related to Israel, the modern Israel, and then how Christians should be, dialoguing with Jews, because at the end of the day, it is Christians, it's Christ or chaos, and you can't really appease both groups. So this is the next clip that I want to talk about with the Big Eva, and it's kind of like a throwaway, I guess, question, because this is one of the things that I criticized Sean DeMars for with the last interview that I did with him, where, Lig and Duncan said that Big Eva is not a real thing, even though he's a part of Big Eva. Doug Wilson is also a part of Big Eva, and he doesn't even understand what Big Eva is, which I just think is not very good.
The wolves in.
Switching gears a little bit, Joe, you on a recent interview had a really interesting take on Big Eva. Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, I think sometimes people make Big Eva into this like really big backroom conspiratorial thing, when in reality what it is it's a bunch of guys are friends, and that everybody has it. It's just a natural feature where you're friends with someone and therefore you trust their judgment. And so if they say you're friends with someone and they say that guy's trouble, you're just going to be inclined to trust them because they're your friends. And that
that happens here.
Right, exactly. Oh, for sure.
Is he solid? Is he
solid? Any concerns there? And so it's a very normal thing. And then the reason it has traction though is because sometimes it's unclear for lay people what the criteria is for why certain people are in and out, right? So why'd that guy get invited? Why does he get a pass? Why is that okay? And it begins to look like it's more deliberate, and people are prone to project more malice than is necessary, that it must be some deep animosity and malice that's animating it, as opposed to simply more informal, friendly sorts of stuff.
So let me give you some criteria that kind of constitutes Big Eva. One, market share. And obviously no one's going to have like 50% market share or even 25% market share, but having enough market share is huge in a vast open sea. So that's number one criteria. Audience size, revenue, those are two other criteria of what would constitute, some criteria for what Big Eva is. Now, do I know how to quantify each of those things? Not necessarily. So there's a lot of ways to quantify it, book sales, revenue, but in general, you're going to see Doug Wilson make some claims about, these organizations are Big Eva, not really us, or not really them. So watch out for that.
So that's what's going on in a lot of the Big Eva conversation.
Another thing that came up I think Lig said this in the interview, that there are other ministries that
are way bigger,
Death on
More
the Gospel
money.
Coalition. So why? And I would say Big Eva is not the biggest.
Yeah.
And
Big Reformed Eva, very small.
Yeah, very, very small. But the Big Eva vibe is, Big Eva is, in my mind, the cool kids.
Okay.
They're the downstream descendants of Young, Restless, and Reformed. And it's a coolness vibe. Focus on the Family is bigger. Ken Ham's Genesis thing, way bigger.
Yeah.
But Ken Ham is never going to be among the cool kids.
Right.
Ever. Right. He's a fundamentalist who believes Genesis.
So this is where Doug Wilson is factually incorrect. In terms of website size, one of the biggest would be Got Questions. They would be Big Eva. They just don't have necessarily the personality that would, qualify as Big Eva in a way. I mean, that's kind of like how G3 is. Like G3, its website's kind of Big Eva, but its personalities are Mid Eva. But Doug Wilson is Big Eva. Ken Ham is Big Eva. But neither of their website ministries are bigger than the Gospel Coalition. In fact, Joe Rigney came from Desiring God, that camp. That is actually a camp that's bigger than the Gospel Coalition. Believe it or not, their website gets more traffic than the Gospel Coalition. It is one of few websites that gets more in the category of faith that gets more traffic than the Gospel Coalition. So that just kind of disproves Doug Wilson's point. Doug Wilson's, blog and Magblog gets around the same amount of traffic as Answers in Genesis, actually. I mean, I did check these numbers before doing this video, and it's just kind of insane that, he's just factually wrong here.
So it's just not going to happen. And I think this is part of the reason why there's a quickness to hostility in the kickback against Big Eva is because Big Eva has exuded for some years now an elitist vibe. Okay, it's
Respectable.
What's that?
Respectable.
Respectable, elitist, polished,
Cool,
slick,
polished.
cool, and a lot of the people out in the country have just about had it with that.
Yeah.
And they're against all elites. They're against, and because we are in a populist uprising in the political realm. And
I just want to be clear that I'm not against elites. I kind of subscribe to more of the elite theory, which, you know, that's a topic for another video. But I would not necessarily call myself a populist. I believe that populism is a tool that can be used, like identity politics, but it is ultimately not the end goal. So I'm going to let him finish.
theological realm, there's a populist uprising.
Which is dangerous.
Which
I
is
mean, there's
dangerous.
good things that can come of it, but it's also really dangerous.
Yes.
Reactionary populist movements don't typically end well.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so there's big problems with it, but that's how it goes.
That's how it goes, yeah.
That's how it goes.
Guys,
So that is Doug Wilson. And those are some of the not so pretty moments in the interview. I'm sure there are good moments in the interview, but those are just what I wanted to highlight because, again, the woke right conversation is going on right now, and Doug Wilson's wrong on the issue again, and you hate to see that. Again, I criticize Doug Wilson because he's not base enough. Some other people out there criticize him because they're, you know, God-hating liberals. We are not the same. So that's all I got to say about that for now. My name is Ray. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. Stay based. Christ is King, and we will catch you on the next one.